Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Simmons, and you're listening to Business Skills 360. Glad you could join me today for the first part of our series on achieving your goals. We're going to kick it off with a look at setting SMART goals and some tips for managing your goals. Now, when I talk about goals, I'm talking about any kind of goal. It could be a personal goal, like improving your sales pitch, or an organizational goal, like expanding successfully into new territory. The basics are the same, so the advice I'm going to share with you applies to goals of any size or scope. Okay, now achieving your goals always begins with setting good goals. But what exactly does a good goal look like? Well, you might have heard people talk about SMART goals. In this case, the word SMART is a mnemonic device. Each of those letters stands for something. The S is for specific. A goal like, I want to be a better salesman, is not specific. But I want to improve my gross sales is. M stands for measurable. Think about that phrase, a better salesman. Can you measure that? No, you can't. But you can measure gross sales. Next, goals should be attainable. Of course, you need to be ambitious, but you shouldn't set goals that are clearly out of reach. In our salesman's case, perhaps improve my gross sales by 10% is reasonable. The R in SMART means relevant. That is the goal aligned with the person or organization's mission statement? Is it a worthwhile goal? And finally, goals must be time-sensitive. If we don't attach some kind of timeline to our goal, then we may lose focus. Sometime in the future is not a very inspiring timeline. Within this financial quarter is. So, let's see if we've managed to put together a SMART goal here. Our hypothetical salesman's goal is, I want to improve my gross sales by 10% within this financial quarter. Very nice. It's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-sensitive. And because it is all of those things, our salesman has a better chance of success. Okay, so you've created a SMART goal. Now the question is, how are you going to manage that goal? First off, you need to make it a priority. Chances are that you or your organization is working towards several different goals. Sometimes those goals compete for precious time or resources. So if you can't give the goal what it needs, then really, what hope does it have of being achieved? Setting aside the time to work toward your goal is key. So is good delegation if the goal is something that depends on the work of others. In this sense, a goal is like a project. In fact, some companies rely on goal management software to make sure they stay on track. And staying on track can be tough, especially if the goal is a long-term one. When the desired outcome is in the distant future, people and groups can become discouraged or forget altogether what they are working toward. That's why goal management also involves breaking a goal into concrete steps. Sometimes people call these smaller steps objectives. Instead of expecting people or ourselves to maintain motivation for something that's far off, we set milestones along the way. Then we can spread the sense of accomplishment out over the duration of the process. Does that make sense? You see, many people and organizations like to make goals but have the terrible habit of abandoning them. And if you give up on your goals regularly, what's the point in making them? Doing this will create a feeling or culture of disappointment and failure. And that is not healthy. So remember, making SMART goals and managing them well are critical. But that's not all there is to achieving goals. You also need to understand the importance of communicating and remembering goals, maintaining motivation, establishing rewards, and dealing with slip-ups. But we'll save that for next week. Thanks for listening, and see you next week. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hi, everyone. I'm Tim Simmons, and you're listening to Business Skills 360. Glad you could join me today for the second part in our look at achieving your goals. Today, I'm going to talk about how to maintain your focus and motivation while you work toward achieving your goals. Let me start off with a quote from the well-known business guru, Robert Allen. Allen said, "The future you see is the future you get." What he's talking about is visualization, which is necessary for achieving your goals. You have to visualize yourself or your organization accomplishing whatever it is you've set out to do. This is what many professional athletes do before a big competition. They walk through the match and imagine themselves winning. Let me repeat it for you. The future you see is the future you get. This is one way of helping you maintain motivation, but there are others. One other way is through a system of rewards. Of course, when you finally reach your goal, there is a great payoff, which could be a sense of accomplishment, greater profits, better working relationships, whatever your goal is related to. But that great payoff may not be enough to sustain you, especially when you're working toward long-term goals. Remember how I mentioned in the last episode that you need to establish milestones or benchmarks along the way. Now, what you need to do is to attach rewards to those milestones. What kind of rewards? Well, that depends on the type of goal. If it's a personal goal, you could reward yourself with something fun, like a night out, or by buying something you really want. If it's an organizational goal, then maybe you need to reward all the people involved. For example, you could throw a party or give bonuses. Those rewards and incentives will help everyone stay on track and give them something real to look forward to. Now, visualization and a system of rewards both help people remember that they've set goals. The mistake that many people and organizations make is to set goals and then promptly forget about them. That's wrong. You and your employees or colleagues should be keeping your goals in mind whenever you do something. You need to remind yourself or your people of your goals. This could mean writing them down, posting them on the staff room wall, or having regular updates. In an organizational setting, goals may have their own communication plans. If you have set goals that depend on the work of other people, those people should know about it. For example, imagine you are a regional sales manager and decide that you want to increase sales by 15% in the next quarter. Who are you going to tell? Well, the salespeople, of course. You need to let them know that there is a clear or SMART goal in place and that you want them to work together to achieve it. Then, you need to check in on their progress, update the entire team, and remind them what they're shooting for. So, do all of these strategies guarantee success? Are these tactics foolproof? Of course not. I'm telling you right now that there will be bumps along the way. You will experience setbacks, and there will be days when the goal appears farther away than the day before. This is normal. A common mistake is to give up on a goal when mistakes are made or problems occur. You need to see these setbacks as opportunities to refocus. Look at what happened. Figure out the reason for the setback, and then you will have improved your chance of success. Failure is not falling down. Failure is staying down. Great. Remember that achieving your goal is a process, not an event. It takes time, energy, motivation, and the ability to deal with adversity. It doesn't happen all at once. But if you set good goals, manage them well, find the right time and resources, and maintain motivation and momentum, you'll get there. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, and good luck with your goal. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hi, it's Tim Simmons here with another edition of Business Skills 360. I've been listening to the current series on handling a crisis, and I just wanted to jump in with a couple of important points on the language we use in a crisis. We've heard some folks dealing with a pretty serious crisis, an accident at a factory. And maybe you've noticed how some of the people are quite careful about the words they use. Careful is important. You see, a crisis is a sensitive situation. Emotions are running high and people are on edge. There is the potential for conflict if you do or say the wrong thing. At the same time, the clock is ticking, and you may not have time to manage everyone's feelings. For these reasons, you have a very fine balancing act between being diplomatic and being direct. What do we mean by being diplomatic? Well, diplomatic language is polite and careful. We use it so people don't feel offended or get upset. Let's see how this works in practice. Imagine you need to tell your boss about a bad accident. Do you say, "There's been a bad accident"? You could say this, but it's probably too direct. To cushion the blow, you could say something like, "It seems that there's been quite a bad accident." How is this more diplomatic? Well, it starts with, "It seems." That's an indirect way of introducing something. Perhaps and maybe are other common ways to do this. Or you can use apparently, like this. Apparently, there's been quite a bad accident. Now, the other thing you heard there is quite, as in quite a bad accident. That's a minimizing expression. It makes the situation sound not as bad as it really is. We do this when we say things like, "This problem is rather urgent," and we have a slight problem. Just by adding words such as quite, rather, slight, a little, and a bit, we can be more diplomatic. Okay, another way to be diplomatic is by using questions. Imagine you think someone made a lousy decision. You could say, "You made a lousy decision." But chances are, that person is going to react negatively. So you should be diplomatic. In this case, you can use a question like, "Are we sure this is the right thing to do?" Or maybe you think someone is trying to decide on a course of action too quickly. You could say, "Wouldn't it be better to talk about this a bit more?" Questions, especially ones starting with would and wouldn't, are more diplomatic than direct statements. Okay, but do we want to be diplomatic all the time? Definitely not. Diplomatic language can be rather indirect, and for that reason, people might not understand just how serious we are. Sometimes we need to convey a sense of urgency or give very clear instructions. In these situations, we need to be direct. Imagine you're having a head-to-head with an employee after a big accident, and you don't want him to talk to the media. You could be diplomatic and say, "It might not be a good idea to talk to the media." But that's not strong enough. In this case, you should be direct and say, "Don't talk to the media." This is what we call an imperative, which is a sentence with no subject. We use them for commands like, "Fix the problem," or "Tell me what happened." Imperatives are direct, not diplomatic, which is exactly what you need here. Direct language is also essential when you're giving instructions, which need to be clear, especially in a crisis. Imagine you want an employee to inspect some machinery, repair any problems, and then file a report. Do you start with, "Maybe we should have a little look at that machinery"? Is that clear? That sounds like you're thinking out loud. The person who hears that may or may not do it. In a crisis, that's asking for trouble. You need to be clear and say, "First, inspect the machinery. Then fix any problems you find and file a report." No diplomatic language like maybe or little. The instructions are perfectly clear because they're direct. So, when should you be diplomatic and when should you be direct? Well, you really need to assess the situation and determine which is best. Diplomatic language can protect people's feelings. It can also avoid conflict and build trust. Those can all be very important in a crisis, when everybody needs to be on board with a plan. On the other hand, direct language can show a sense of urgency and seriousness, and it can prevent confusion. Those are also important in a conflict, when things must happen quickly and misunderstanding is just not an option. Remember that to be a good crisis manager, you need to adapt your style and strategy to the situation. You can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to the language you use. That's all for today. So long, and see you again soon. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today I want to help you organize your ideas. Before we get into that, I'd like to let you know that our Business English app for the iPhone and iPad is now available in the App Store. The app comes packed with over 100 great lessons from Business English Pod, including all our Skills 360 lessons. And the best news of all, it's free to download. Just head over to businessenglishpod.com for the App Store link. So, back to ideas. Sure, you've got lots of them. And sure, they're important to you. But are they important to others? Well, they could be, but only if they're clear and organized. You've probably been frustrated when people run on at length about what they think, using vague language. And you've probably tuned out when someone jumps around chaotically from idea to idea without tying it all together for a purpose. That just doesn't work. And sometimes it's not the best ideas that win, but the ones that are most clearly articulated. But exactly how can we do this? Ideas can be very wild animals. They don't always come into our heads in an organized manner. Sometimes they don't seem to come into our heads at all. And they don't just get together in their own groups and organize themselves. So we need to generate them, tame them, and get them into usable form. Today, we'll look at a few different frameworks for generating ideas. In this case, we're using a form of organization to actually get the ideas flowing. But first, think about your purpose. What is it you are trying to do? Do you need to persuade someone? Are you trying to inform people? Are you trying to warn, recommend, guide, criticize, defend, describe, or inspire? Understanding your purpose will help you decide which ideas to highlight and which to deep six. Once you understand your purpose, try getting out as many ideas as possible. Lay it all on the table. Everything is fair game at this stage. Don't be afraid of things that are off the wall. Just feel free to brainstorm and write down whatever comes to mind. You can evaluate the ideas later. For now, you just want to generate them. But sometimes this is easier said than done. And that's why we use different tools or techniques for idea generation. One useful technique is mind mapping. To make a mind map, start with one word in the center of a piece of paper. From that word, you're going to create a radial branching system of ideas. What word do you start with? Any general idea or topic you want to explore. Say you're planning your goals for next year. Maybe you start with that word, goals. Now, write a few words around the middle and connect them to that central word with lines. These are major themes that relate to the central idea. So around goals, you might have work, health, financial, and social. Then do the same for each of these major themes. Keep writing new ideas around each new subword until you have a big branching structure around the central word. We also have something called concept maps. Concept maps have a branching structure, like mind maps, but they branch down rather than out. And they illustrate how ideas are connected. Start with an idea at the top in a circle. Then jot down related concepts in circles below. Draw lines to these related concepts, and on those lines, write how the first idea is related to the second. You can use phrases like leads to, or results in, or creates, or just is. For example, imagine you're putting together a presentation about social media. So you write that phrase at the top. Below it, you draw several lines leading to circles. On one line, you write leads to, and in its circle, you put increased communication. From that circle, you draw a line that says contributes to, and a circle with better understanding between coworkers. You see? You're looking at exactly how ideas are related. Besides these mapping techniques, there are some handy charts we can use. A very basic one is a pros and cons list. You may be very familiar with that. Draw a line down the middle of the page and write pros on one side and cons on the other. Pros are positive aspects, while cons are negative aspects. Then there's a SWOT analysis, which is commonly used for evaluating a business idea. SWOT means strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You can write these words in the 4 boxes of a large divided square. Within each box, just crank out as many ideas as possible. All of these techniques have value, and you might want to consider using several of them. One thing to notice is that they all involve writing things down on paper. This is important. You need to get those ideas out of your head and into writing in front of you. It will help you see their relationships, remember them, and organize them later. And it's the organizing side of things we'll talk about next time. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the mybeonline.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon. Business Skills 360. the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today I'd like to help you organize your ideas. Before we get into that, a quick reminder that our Business English app for the iPhone and iPad is now available in the App Store. The app comes packed with over 100 great lessons from Business English Pod, including all our Skills 360 lessons. And the best news of all, it's free to download. Just head over to businessenglishpod.com for the App Store link. Okay, now here's a situation we all find ourselves in. We've got a purpose, and we have a bunch of ideas, and we have to figure out how to make those ideas serve our purpose. Maybe the purpose is to convince your manager that you deserve a promotion. Or maybe you want to develop a personal goal plan. Or maybe you have to give a presentation to the board about recent technological trends. No matter what your purpose, you can't just rattle off a bunch of ideas one after the other. They need organization. And this is why we take time to prepare. Last week, we looked at several ways to generate ideas. But once you have a big list of ideas, what are you going to do with them? That's what I'll talk about today. You need to start by revisiting your purpose. What is it you're trying to do? Inform? Persuade? Set goals? Warn? Recommend? And who are you organizing your ideas for? A group of potential investors? Your boss? A customer or client? Or are the ideas just for yourself? With a clear purpose and audience, you can go through your list of ideas and cross out those that don't really apply. For example, maybe you're trying to convince a customer to switch from the competition to your company. You've brainstormed all the great things about your company and its products. Somewhere in your list is positive workplace culture. That's wonderful. But does a potential customer care? Probably not. So nix it. Great. So you've whittled down your ideas. Now what? Now you need to start combining and grouping what remains. Look at the ideas and see if any themes jump out at you. You may notice that several ideas are linked to one bigger idea, or one big idea in your list seems to include a bunch of smaller ideas in your list. You can rewrite these groupings of ideas on a new piece of paper, or you can just draw lines connecting them. For example, maybe you are going to be introducing your company to a potential foreign partner. You've come up with a big list of ideas related to your business. It includes things like salespeople, products, brand image, executive, history, founder. You peruse this list and see that salespeople, executive, and founder are all people. So you put them in a group. How many groups you end up with will vary. But if you're going to make your ideas work for you, it's good to aim for a manageable number of groups. Most people deal well with 2, 3, or 4. Any more than that, and it becomes more complex and less memorable. Once you've grouped your ideas, explore them a bit more. Remove the ideas that don't really seem to fit perfectly, and try to think of others that you've missed. Strive for balance. You want your groups of ideas to have roughly the same amount of content. In our earlier example, in which you grouped different people together, you might realize you want to throw in others, like researchers and factory workers. And maybe you want to cross out founder, because it doesn't seem to gel with your purpose. So, you've got a few groups of ideas or things, and you've made sure that the groups are balanced. Now, try giving these groups short titles. One word is best, though you can use a phrase as well. Try to make them parallel. That is, they should all be phrased the same way. For example, you might have at home, at work, and at the cottage. You could also have them all start with the same letter. For example, we had people as one of the idea groups for introducing your company. Your other groups could be products and places. Doesn't that have a nice ring to it? People, products, and places. That's what you're shooting for. A few groups of related ideas that can be given tight and memorable titles. You start by generating as many ideas as possible. Then you start paring down and grouping them together. Then you explore each group a bit more. And finally, you label them. You're organized and ready to go. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the mybeonline.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon.
You're listening to Business English Pod, the business English podcast for professionals on the move. Performance appraisals, sometimes also called performance evaluations or reviews, are a powerful way to develop staff's potential. For appraisals to succeed, however, it's important that they're conducted in a structured way. In addition, it's important that skill and diplomacy are used to handle the two main tasks of the appraisal, giving feedback and setting goals. So this is the first in a two-part series that focuses on structure, skill, and diplomacy in performance appraisals. In this episode, we'll deal with giving feedback. In the second, we'll handle setting goals. This episode focuses on giving effective feedback that creates a positive environment and builds trust. These feedback skills are useful not only in performance appraisals, but also in any situation that requires making critical comments to someone about their work. In the listening for this episode, Wendy is a new hire at ConStar's video conference call center. She's been working there for about 10 months, including training, and now it's time for a first 6-month performance review. Derek, the manager of the operations department, will be giving Wendy her appraisal. As a video conference coordinator for ConStar, Wendy's job requires using special equipment to set up and connect video conferences for Fortune 500 clients. ConStar's customers hold regular remote meetings among multiple locations all around the world. Wendy's job is to make the connections between locations and to solve customers' problems when they call into the help desk. What kind of feedback will Derek give Wendy? She is very smart, but she tends to get hot under the collar when she works under pressure. That means she gets upset when she feels job stress. Sometimes she loses her temper, and her colleagues have complained about it. As usual, try to answer the following questions while you listen. The answers will be posted in a few days at www.businessenglishpod.com. First, how many meetings is Wendy handling per day at the moment? Second, what is Wendy's main issue that Derek wants to give her feedback about? And finally, what advice does Derek give Wendy to help her correct the problem?
Hi, Wendy. Come in and take a seat.
Thanks.
How are things today? Fine, I guess.
Good. So I've been reviewing your performance, and it looks like there have been some big improvements in the last 6 months.
Yeah?
Yes, I'm really pleased with your progress.
Great.
We set a goal of handling 8 meetings per day, and you're already up to 11.
Yes, it's busy, but I love it.
That's great. Watch out, though. We all turn into a bunch of workaholics here,
Yes, sometimes it's a real rush.
and sometimes it's stressful.
Sure.
So how do you feel? Are there any specific areas you want to improve?
Well, to be honest, I guess I fly off the handle a little bit sometimes.
Yes, that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk about.
Uh-oh.
No worries. Just listen. Your reviews are positive, but they mention this, and I've seen it myself.
You have?
Yes, the other day when I was walking through the control center, I could see you were pretty worked up.
Ah, the customer was upset and I couldn't get the bandwidth I needed.
I know, I understand. Sometimes it's like that.
I just get so into it, you know?
I can tell you really care about your work. That's great. That's just what we need.
Uh-huh, but I should chill out.
Yeah, look, we've all been through this kind of thing, and I'm very sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get into a pickle like that, we just need to calm down and put it into perspective.
I got it.
You should explain to the customer that you're doing your best to address the issue and then take 10 deep breaths.
Okay.
Then ask your team leader for help. That's what she's there for.
Uh-huh.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I can do that.
Now let's talk about your customer satisfaction KPIs. They look good too.
Derek has handled his feedback very skillfully, hasn't he? Not only did Wendy bring up the problem herself, but she agreed to change her behavior without a fight. Let's go through the dialogue to study how Derek manages the feedback. First, at the beginning, he makes a little informal small talk with Wendy to set her at ease.
Hi, Wendy. Come in and take a seat.
Thanks.
How are things today?
Fine, I guess.
Then he kicks off the appraisal on a positive note.
Good. So I've been reviewing your performance, and it looks like there have been some big improvements in the last 6 months.
Yeah?
Yes, I'm really pleased with your progress.
Even if an employee's performance is not satisfactory, you should usually find something good to say at the beginning of the interview. Praise the employee. That way, you create a good atmosphere, and the employee will be more receptive to your suggestions. Of course, in some cultures, you won't seem like a boss if you begin by being nice. Almost everyone, however, likes to hear positive comments about themselves. So try to find an appropriate way to do it. The key here is to sound sincere. Make sure what you say is true, or that you've seen it with your own eyes. Let's listen to other possible ways to start off on a positive note. For example, to someone who's always talking to his workmates when he should be working, you might say this.
Well, Matthew, I can really see you're getting along well with your coworkers.
And to someone who has good technical skills but lacks people skills, you might say this.
Honestly, George, you've really learned the technical side of the business very quickly.
After Derek kicks off the meeting on a positive note, what happens next? Remember, he has just said to Wendy that she has made big improvements over the last 6 months.
Great.
We set a goal of handling 8 meetings per day, and you're already up to 11.
Meetings per day refers to the number of video conferences that Wendy successfully connects on an average day. Wendy's original goal at the end of 6 months was 8 meetings per day, but now she's already handling 11. In this exchange, Derek is still praising Wendy. His praise is a method of carefully moving into the critical comments that he has. Let's see how he does that. What does Wendy say next?
Yes, it's busy, but I love it.
That's great. Watch out, though. We all turn into a bunch of workaholics here,
Yes, sometimes it's a real rush.
and sometimes it's stressful.
Sure.
Talking about the number of meetings per day is a way for Derek to bring up the topic of work stress. The idioms workaholic and it's a real rush refer to being addicted to your job and to work pressure. You can look at the study notes or the online exercises for this episode for complete definitions and examples. By talking about work pressure, Derek has opened the way for Wendy to bring up her problem of losing her temper. If possible, get the employees themselves to bring up any problems. Encourage self-criticism. This is a way of preventing a defensive reaction. People are generally much more open to criticism when it comes from themselves. Derek uses a skillful type of question to get Wendy talking about her temper. What does he say?
So how do you feel? Are there any specific areas you want to improve?
This is a question used to encourage self-criticism. What are some other ways to do this?
So maybe you have some thoughts on your performance?
How about you? What's your self-assessment at this point?
Maybe you wouldn't mind first sharing your own thoughts about how you've been doing.
How does Wendy respond to Derek's encouragement of self-criticism? She uses an idiom, to fly off the handle, which means to lose one's temper.
Well, to be honest, I guess I fly off the handle a little bit sometimes.
Yes, that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk about.
Uh-oh.
Next, Derek talks about what he has seen with his own two eyes.
No worries. Just listen. Your reviews are positive, but they mention this, and I've seen it myself.
You have?
Yes, the other day when I was walking through the control center, I could see you were pretty worked up.
In this exchange, Derek is using another classic technique of effective feedback. He focuses on what he has seen or heard himself. Keeping the feedback detailed and specific enables you to deal with the real situation at hand. Avoid making moral evaluations or general comments. Focus instead on the specific behaviors you wish to change. Listen to a couple more examples.
This is something I have noticed too.
Let's focus on something specific.
Let me give you a concrete example of what I mean.
I just want to talk about what I've seen with my own two eyes.
How does Wendy respond to Derek's comments?
The customer was upset and I couldn't get the bandwidth I needed.
Bandwidth refers to the amount of data that can pass over internet cables. Video conferencing requires a lot of bandwidth. Larger conferences with higher quality video require even more bandwidth. In the situation Wendy is describing, for some reason, the bandwidth wasn't available, and the customer got upset. Then Wendy got upset too. How does Derek respond?
I know, I understand. Sometimes it's like that.
I just get so into it, you know?
I can tell you really care about your work. That's great. That's just what we need.
Wendy explains that she gets so into it, which means that she gets excited and absorbed by her work. Obviously, she is having a bit of a defensive reaction. That is, she's attempting to defend herself from Derek's criticism by explaining the situation from her point of view. But Derek responds by calming Wendy down or defusing her defensive reaction. He does this by showing empathy or compassion. That means he feels with her. How does he do this? He says,
I know, I understand. Sometimes it's like that.
and
I can tell you really care about your work. That's great. That's just what we need.
what are some other expressions you can use to show your empathy?
Look, I understand that it's a really tough kind of situation to deal with.
I'm very sympathetic.
I have those kinds of days too.
I know what you mean.
I know that this kind of thing can be very challenging.
I really hear what you're saying.
You're not the first person to feel that way.
Back in the dialogue, Derek continues to show compassion. Meanwhile, Wendy responds well to his empathy, doesn't she?
But I should chill out.
Yeah, look, we've all been through this kind of thing, and I'm very sympathetic. But when we get into a pickle like that, we just need to calm down and put it into perspective.
I got it.
Wendy says she needs to chill out or calm down. Derek advises her that when we get into a pickle like that is, encounter a difficult problem, we need to put it into perspective. This means relax and take a larger philosophical view of things. For complete definitions and examples of these idioms, remember to check out the study notes and the online exercises for this episode. As with the beginning of the dialogue, Derek's use of informal language helps create a relaxed and friendly atmosphere. What happens next? Derek continues to give Wendy advice.
You should explain to the customer that you're doing your best to address the issue and then take 10 deep breaths.
Okay.
Then ask your team leader for help. That's what she's there for. Does that make sense?
Derek uses a range of expressions to advise Wendy. Grammatically, he uses modal verbs to tell her what can and should be done. These forms are often easier to accept than direct commands. Finally, he makes sure to check understanding. Checking back and confirming is a critical communication skill that we've handled before, most notably in BEP 35, clarifying what was meant. That would be a very good episode to review, since confirming understanding is a very important part of the feedback process. How does the dialogue finish off?
Yeah, I think I can do that.
Now let's talk about your customer satisfaction KPIs. They look good too.
Success. Wendy has identified the problem through self-criticism. Then, after a brief defensive response that Derek diffused with empathy, she has accepted his advice on how to correct her behavior. Now they're ready to talk about other KPIs, that is, key performance indicators. A KPI is a key measurement of performance of an employee or work process. In the second part of this series, we'll study how Derek and Wendy negotiate and set goals for various KPIs. But before we finish this episode, let's practice some of the skills we learned today. Imagine you are a manager at Constar conducting a series of performance reviews. You're giving feedback to your employees, but they're having defensive reactions. What will you say to calm them down? You'll hear a series of cues in which your employees, who are a little upset, defensively explain the situation. After each beep, give an appropriate expression of empathy, such as, "I'm very sympathetic," or, "Look, I understand that it's a really tough kind of situation." Are you ready? Let's give it a try.
I just get so angry when the customer is unreasonable.
It's hopeless. No matter how hard I work, it's never good enough.
Sometimes the pressure is just so intense I want to scream.
How did you do? Let's listen to some example answers.
I just get so angry when the customer is unreasonable.
Answer. You're not the first person to feel that way.
It's hopeless. No matter how hard I work, it's never good enough.
Answer. I have those kinds of days too.
Sometimes the pressure is just so intense I want to scream.
Answer. I know what you mean.
Of course, there are many possible ways to respond to each question. Can you think of even more original language to express empathy? I'm sure you can. Be sure to go back and do the practice again. Substitute different phrases to build fluency. That's it for this episode. We've covered a series of useful techniques for giving feedback, starting off on a positive note, encouraging self-criticism, and showing empathy. Be sure also to read the study notes and do the online exercises, which you can access at www.businessenglishpod.com. There, you'll find definitions of the vocabulary and idioms in today's dialogue, along with a full transcript and extensive language and listening practice. See you in part 2 of this series, when we'll be talking about another important part of the appraisal interview, setting goals. Thanks for listening. Want to get more out of Business English Pod? Then go to www.businessenglishpod.com and sign up as a premium member. Premium members can access detailed study notes and the new Phrasecast to practice all the useful language we featured today. You're listening to Business English Pod, the Business English podcast for professionals on the move. This is the second in a 2-part series on performance appraisals. In the first, we considered giving feedback. In this episode, we'll discuss setting goals. The American poet Carl Sandburg once said, "Nothing happens unless first we dream." To this, we can add the words of time management expert Diana Scharf Hunt, "Goals are dreams with deadlines." To reach our dreams, it's necessary to set goals. Without goals, there is no change, no development, no success. This is just as true for an individual as it is for an organization. That's why, along with feedback, goal setting is a very important part of the appraisal process. So in this follow-up episode on job appraisals, we'll be focusing on strategies and expressions for setting goals during the appraisal interview. Much of the language we'll be learning in this episode is also useful in any meeting where we need to discuss and set targets. Wendy and Derek, Wendy's manager, have already discussed her progress and set goals for the areas of customer satisfaction and job training. As the listening continues, they turn to talking about 2 important productivity measurements. As you listen, pay attention to the language that Derek uses to structure the conversation and to negotiate and agree on goals with Wendy. Try to answer the following questions. The answers will be posted in a few days at www.businessenglishpod.com. First, what are the 2 important productivity measurements that Derek discusses with Wendy? Second, how does Derek feel about Wendy making one-off, that is, special, solutions for each customer? And finally, what does Derek advise Wendy to tell a customer who has not booked enough bandwidth?
Great. We've agreed on your training plan. Let's just talk about your productivity goals, and then we can wrap it up.
All right.
Starting with meetings per day, I think we can bump it up to 12.
I know I can do 14.
Yeah, but there's no need to rush into it.
All right, so 12 meetings a day.
Great. That's that. Okay, now the average time per meeting. Currently you're at 33 minutes per meeting. That must feel like a lot of work.
Sure, I really like to go the extra mile for my customers.
But that's not always a good thing.
Really?
Well, I'd much rather see you be steady and consistent. Like the other day, your team leader said you rigged up a special system.
Yes. The customer hadn't booked enough bandwidth, so I jury-rigged it.
I can tell you're already really good with the equipment, which is great.
Yeah?
But we just can't be doing one-off solutions like that all the time. The customer learns to expect it, and efficiency goes down.
Yes, I guess so.
We end up spending too much time on the calls, and it's hard on you too.
So I should just say sorry?
Yeah, be polite, be firm, then give them the option to rebook and hold the meeting later. Or hold it now with reduced bandwidth. Then move on to the next call.
Okay.
So overall, I'd like to see a reduction from your current average of 33 minutes per call to just 15 minutes per call.
15 minutes? Wow, that's fast.
Yes, but I know you can do it.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Great. With stats like this, you're going to be a star performer. Your team leader already thinks highly of you, and I'm confident you're going to be a key member of the team.
Thank you.
Good. Now let's schedule the next review.
While setting goals, Derek uses positive language to maintain a good atmosphere. Meanwhile, he continues to skillfully deliver his feedback to Wendy. Let's take a closer look at the strategies and expressions he uses. First, did you notice how Derek is careful to maintain a clear structure in the conversation?
Great. We've agreed on your training plan. Let's just talk about your productivity goals, and then we can wrap it up.
All right.
Here, Derek is using the type of signposting language that we studied for presentations in BEP 102. He is always careful to make it clear to Wendy and to himself what they've already talked about and what they're going to talk about next. Maintaining a clear structure is important to a successful appraisal. Now, what is the first productivity goal they deal with?
Starting with meetings per day, I think we can bump it up to 12.
I know I can do 14.
Yeah, but there's no need to rush into it.
All right, so 12 meetings a day.
Here, Derek and Wendy are negotiating the goal. Derek uses idiomatic language to negotiate the goal both upwards
I think we can bump it up to 12.
and downwards.
I know I can do 14.
Yeah, but there's no need to rush into it.
Let's study more examples of language you can use to negotiate the goal upwards and downwards. Starting with upwards.
I think it's time to ramp it up a little bit.
This is an area where we can boost our efforts.
It's time to take it to the next level.
I think we can raise the bar on this one.
The last expression, to raise the bar, comes from the track and field sporting activity, the high jump. This is the event in which you try to jump over a raised bar. In the business context, to raise the bar means to set a higher goal. How about expressions for negotiating the goal downwards?
I'd say let's just ease into this.
Remember the old saying, slow and steady wins the race.
I think we should take it one step at a time.
All of the expressions we just studied are great informal, idiomatic expressions for negotiating the goal upwards and downwards. Informal, idiomatic language sounds friendly and helps keep the atmosphere non-confrontational. That is, helps keep the meeting from becoming a battle or a fight. To end the first topic, Derek uses another signpost.
Great. That's that.
We can say, "That's that," when a topic is finished or decided. Now, what is the second productivity goal that Derek wants to talk about?
Okay, now the average time per meeting. Currently you're at 33 minutes per meeting. That must feel like a lot of work.
Sure, I really like to go the extra mile for my customers.
But that's not always a good thing.
Really?
Well, I'd much rather see you be steady and consistent.
Wendy is obviously enthusiastic about her work, but from the business point of view, this enthusiasm causes her efficiency to go down, which means the company loses money. So, Derek wants Wendy to spend less time on each meeting in order to increase her all-around productivity. Derek's challenge is to communicate this idea to Wendy without demotivating her. That is, without damaging her motivation or morale. The first step for Derek is to introduce the idea by hinting at it.
Currently, you're at 33 minutes per meeting. That must feel like a lot of work.
Actually, as is often the case, what is good for the employee is also good for the company. Derek focuses on the benefit to Wendy of changing her behavior, which is she can make her work easier. Next, he states his idea more directly by using a form of diplomatic criticism. When Wendy says she likes to go the extra mile, that is, put in extra effort for her customers, Derek says,
But that's not always a good thing.
in this sentence, but and not always act as softeners, just like those we've studied in other episodes on diplomatic language, such as BEP 24 and BEP 70. What are some other ways to introduce diplomatic criticism?
Actually, though, there may be one or two problems with that approach.
To be honest, there's another side to this as well.
Another great way to handle diplomatic criticism is to use the although structure, which we've studied as a method for diplomatic disagreement in BEP 29. We can put our criticism in the although part of a sentence, then put a positive comment to act as a softener in the main part of the sentence.
Although you need to pay more attention to details, I can tell you're really enthusiastic about your work. That's good.
Back in the dialogue, Derek is very careful to give a specific example of what he means. As we discussed last time, base your feedback on real examples.
Like the other day, your team leader said you rigged up a special system.
Yes, the customer hadn't booked enough bandwidth, so I jury-rigged it.
I can tell you're already really good with the equipment, which is great.
Yeah?
The expression rigged up and jury-rigged refer to improvising something, that is, making something up, creating an original or innovative solution. Derek emphasizes the positive aspect of this, which is that Wendy obviously is already good with the equipment. That is, her technical skill level is high. But how does the dialogue continue?
But we just can't be doing one-off solutions like that all the time. The customer learns to expect it, and efficiency goes down.
Yes, I guess so.
We end up spending too much time on the calls, and it's hard on you, too.
Again, Derek is placing the emphasis on the benefit to Wendy of changing her behavior. In addition to letting her know the business case for spending less time on meetings, he has underlined that doing so will also be easier for her. What's next?
So I should just say sorry?
Yeah, be polite, be firm, then give them the option to rebook and hold the meeting later, or hold it now with reduced bandwidth. Then move on to the next call.
Okay.
To be firm means to be strong, not to easily change your mind. Derek is taking this opportunity to train Wendy, reminding her of the principle of always giving the customer more than one option. How does the dialogue continue?
So overall, I'd like to see a reduction from your current average of 33 minutes per call to just 15 minutes per call.
15 minutes? Wow, that's fast.
In this segment, Derek clearly states his goal for Wendy. Sometimes, as a boss, you don't need to be negotiating the target. You just need to state it. What are some other ways to state your expectations?
I expect you to get 20 more orders by the end of the year.
What I need from you is a commitment to increase your sales by 10%.
It's very important that you work hard to achieve this goal.
Can you make sure you remember to punch out your time card every day?
Let's try to improve your customer satisfaction rating to 95%.
I want you to reduce the number of failed meetings to 1 per month.
After stating a clear goal for Wendy, Derek follows up, showing confidence in her ability to achieve it.
Yes, but I know you can do it.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Can you think of more expressions to show your confidence?
I know you'll succeed.
I have a lot of faith in you.
I'm confident that you'll impress us.
You're going to do great.
You've got what it takes to succeed.
How does the dialogue end? To finish up the performance appraisal, Derek ends with more confidence-building language to boost or raise Wendy's morale.
Great. With stats like this, you're going to be a star performer. Your team leader already thinks highly of you, and I'm confident you're going to be a key member of the team.
Stats is short for statistics, by which Derek is referring to Wendy's KPIs or key performance indicators. He's sure that when she reaches her goals for the next appraisal, she's going to be counted among the team's star or best performers. As we've seen throughout this episode, it's not enough simply to set goals. We also have to manage the employee's expectations and emotions. Derek is showing us that in addition to giving feedback and setting goals, a third very important goal of the performance appraisal is to create and nourish in your employees a positive attitude toward their work. When we finish the appraisal, it's important to schedule the next meeting.
Thank you.
Good. Now let's schedule the next review.
Now it's your turn to talk. We're going to practice stating expectations to an employee. Imagine you are a manager at Constar. You're holding a series of performance appraisal interviews. You'll be hearing several cues. Each cue tells you the name of an employee and your goal for him or her. Based on each cue, create a couple of sentences in which you set the employee's target. For example, if you hear, Sandra, increase meetings per day 30%. First, you might use an expression to negotiate the goal up, like, Sandra, I'd like to raise the bar. Then you need to state your expectations. For example, by saying, I expect you to increase meetings per day by 30% in the next 6 months. In other cues, you may also need to use expressions for negotiating the goal down. For example, ease into it and take it one step at a time. Are you ready? Let's give it a try.
George, increase customer satisfaction rating from 78 to 90%.
Max, reduce meetings per day from 17 to 14.
Cindy, reduce the number of failed meetings to 1 per month.
Nora, increase time per meeting from 7 minutes to 15 minutes.
How did you do? Let's listen to some examples. Remember, though, that there are many different possible answers for each question.
George, increase customer satisfaction rating from 78 to 90%. Answer. George, it's time to ramp it up a little. I want you to improve your customer satisfaction rating from 78 to 90%.
Max, reduce meetings per day from 17 to 14. Answer. Max, I think we should take it one step at a time. Can you reduce your number of meetings per day from 17 to 14?
Cindy, reduce the number of failed meetings to 1 per month. Answer. Cindy, I'd like to raise the bar. Let's reduce your total number of failed meetings to just 1 per month.
Nora, increase time per meeting from 7 minutes to 15 minutes. Answer. Nora, remember the old expression, slow and steady wins the race? What I need from you is to increase time per meeting from 7 minutes to 15 minutes.
It's good to go back and do the practice again. This time, substitute different language to build fluency. That concludes setting goals in a performance appraisal. In this episode, we've studied language for negotiating targets, criticizing diplomatically, stating your expectations clearly, and boosting morale by showing confidence. We've seen how an important part of the appraisal process, in addition to giving feedback and setting targets, is to foster in employees a positive attitude towards their work. Be sure to check out the study notes for this and other episodes, which you can access at www.businessenglishpod.com. There, you'll find a complete transcript, vocabulary explanations, and language practice. In addition, take advantage of our online learning center, which has many more great language exercises. That's all at www.businessenglishpod.com. Thank you for listening. Want to get more out of Business English Pod? Then go to www.businessenglishpod.com and sign up as a premium member. Premium members can access detailed study notes and the new Phrasecast to practice all the useful language we featured today. You're listening to Business English Pod, the Business English podcast for professionals on the move.
Business English Pod is turning 2, and to celebrate, we're giving away an iPhone each month to new premium members. All you have to do is purchase a 6 or 12-month premium membership during May or June of 2008. We'll hold a prize drawing each month, and the winner will receive a brand new iPhone. To learn more, visit www.businessenglishpod.com.
People do not always get along, so dealing with conflict is part of any job. And as often as not, work disagreements get resolved as much as in informal discussions in the hallway as they do in the conference room. So, in this 2-part series on resolving conflict, we'll be studying useful language for discussing and resolving disagreements. We will be focusing not on major conflicts between companies or inside organizations, but rather on the everyday sort of disagreements that all of us have to deal with to be successful in our work. In the listening, Elegant is a company that designs and manufactures bathroom fixtures, sinks, toilets, and so on. Ben has recently joined Elegant as a training specialist. When he started, he was promised that Elegant would hire someone to help him with his workload. But instead, he is still doing almost everything by himself. He was also promised the opportunity to do some course design, but instead his manager, Jerry, insists on closely supervising all of Ben's work. Ben feels like he is working harder than anyone else in the office. He is always the last one to leave the department in the evening. But he doesn't feel that his hard work is getting recognized. As you listen, pay attention to the language that Jerry and Ben use to deal with this disagreement. Also, try to answer the following questions. The answers will be posted in a few days on our website at www.businessenglishpod.com. 1. Jerry says he wants to sit down informally and thrash things out a little. What do you think this means? 2. A strain is something that is tiring and perhaps irritating. What does Jerry say is getting to be kind of a strain?
So, Ben, I sense there might be some issues with work that you're not 100% satisfied with, and I just wanted to sit down with you informally and thrash things out a little.
Okay.
So I can see that you've been working really hard, and that might be an area of concern for you.
Well, yes. You know, I am the last one out of here almost every night, and I've got to admit it's getting to be kind of a strain.
Last one out every night. Yeah, that could be frustrating.
Yeah, it's not that I mind putting in the extra hours, it's just that it feels a little unfair when other people are leaving at 5 every day.
Yes, that's understandable.
And it seems to me that we're pretty understaffed in the training area.
Right. I think that's a valid concern. As you know, a support position is budgeted, and we're working on getting someone in here.
Yes, and I know it's just taking a little longer than usual.
That's right. But in the interim, one thing we might try is passing on as much of the admin to the trainers as possible.
Well, frankly, I'm already doing that to some extent, and I just think that there's a limit to how much it helps, if you know what I mean.
Well, what are your views? How do you think we should deal with this?
Jerry and Ben seem to be well on their way to working out their disagreement, don't they? What kinds of language and expressions do they use to move their discussion forward? Let's listen again.
So, Ben, I sense there might be some issues with work that you're not 100% satisfied with, and I just wanted to sit down with you informally and thrash things out a little.
How does Jerry open the discussion? Notice the tentative or careful language he uses. He says that he senses or feels that there might be some issues with work that Ben is not 100% satisfied with. These qualifiers, such as might and not 100%, act as buffers or cushions to soften the impact of Jerry's speech. Meanwhile, I sense or I feel are non-threatening ways to start a conversation. In other words, Jerry is talking about his feelings instead of accusing Ben directly. This approach will make Ben feel more comfortable. In addition, that Jerry just wants to sit down informally likewise helps make the situation seem less threatening to Ben. Finally, the idiom to thrash things out a little means to discuss something in order to work out a solution. We can also say to hash things out. This idiom is informal and gives Ben the impression of a discussion between friends. Thus, Jerry's whole introduction to the discussion set up a situation that is friendly and productive. What are some other idioms and qualifiers we can use to open a discussion?
I have a feeling that there might be some issues we need to deal with, so I was hoping we could sit down together and hash things out a little.
I sense that there might be some areas you're not completely satisfied with these days, so I was hoping to have an opportunity to air out any concerns you might have.
Is there anything on your mind?
Is there anything you'd like to tell me about? I'm all ears.
I'm all ears means I'm willing to listen. To air out concerns means to bring private problems out into the open. Now let's continue going through the dialogue.
Okay.
So I can see that you've been working really hard, and that might be an area of concern for you.
What does Jerry say? First, he starts with something that he has observed. I can see you've been working really hard. Then he uses tentative or careful language to attempt to identify the problem, and that might be an area of concern for you. An area of concern refers to a problem or worry. Overall, Jerry's strategy is to begin by mentioning something that he has really seen with his own two eyes, and to use tentative language. His goal is to get Jerry started talking. Now let's practice some more of this type of language for identifying the problem.
I've noticed that you and your co-workers seem to be arguing a lot recently.
I was just wondering if I could perhaps get a clearer picture of exactly what was going on.
It seems to me in recent weeks that you've been coming in a little late to work, more often than before.
I know there's a good reason for this, and I'm very concerned as to what it is.
Particularly the last phrase, "I know there's a good reason for this," is a useful way to win someone's trust because it shows confidence and faith in them and a willingness to understand. How does Ben respond to Jerry's attempt to identify the problem? Let's listen again.
Yes. You know, I am the last one out of here almost every night, and I've got to admit it's getting to be kind of a strain.
Last one out every night. Yeah, that could be frustrating.
What is Ben's area of concern? He is the last one out of, that is, to leave, the office every night. This is getting to be tiring and irritating. That is, it's getting to be a strain. Notice how Ben also uses qualifiers and tentative language like kind of a. His choice of verb tense is also well considered and careful. Instead of saying, "It's gotten to be a strain," it's completed or finished, he says, "It's getting to be a strain." It's happening now, so there is still hope to reverse or change the situation. How does Jerry respond? First, he acknowledges that he has heard. Then he repeats or echoes some of Jerry's words to show that he is listening. Last one out every night. Finally, he gives a personal reaction. Yeah, I could see how that could lead to frustrations. Together, these three responses, acknowledgement, echo, and personal reaction, show that Jerry is actively listening, which will encourage Ben to keep talking. Let's practice a couple more examples of active listening.
And I guess working the early shift every day is just getting to be really frustrating.
I see. Frustrating. Yes, I can understand what you mean.
So, as far as I'm concerned, there are some pretty significant communication problems.
Communication problems. I can see you feel strongly about this.
In the next segment of the dialogue, as Ben tells Jerry about his feelings, Jerry is careful to show sympathy or understanding. Let's listen again.
Yeah, it's not that I mind putting in the extra hours, it's just that it feels a little unfair when other people are leaving at 5 every day.
Yes, that's understandable.
And it seems to me that we're pretty understaffed in the training area.
Right. I think that's a valid concern.
Yes, that's understandable. And, right, I think that's a valid concern, are both ways of showing sympathy or understanding. A valid concern is a real concern, so Jerry is saying he thinks Ben's concerns are real. Being sympathetic is an important way to win someone's trust and encourage someone to speak. Even if you don't agree with what a person is saying, you can still show sympathy with them by saying, for example, "I can see that you feel strongly about this." Let's review some expressions that we've studied for showing sympathy.
Right. I think that's a valid concern.
Yes, that's understandable.
Yes, I can understand what you mean.
I can see you feel strongly about this.
I understand that this is very frustrating.
I know what you mean.
Now, how does Jerry respond to Ben's concern?
As you know, a support position is budgeted, and we're working on getting someone in here.
Yes, and I know it's just taking a little longer than usual.
That's right. But in the interim, one thing we might try is passing on as much of the admin to the trainers as possible.
Jerry reminds Ben that a support position, that is, an assistant, is budgeted or planned to help Ben with his work. Then Jerry suggests to pass on the admin or administration work, photocopying, planning, record keeping, to the actual trainers or teachers of the courses that Ben is overseeing. This is a way of reducing Ben's workload. To make this suggestion, Jerry says, one thing we might try is... This is a careful, indirect and teamwork-oriented way, emphasizing we, the team, to give a suggestion. What other phrases like this can we use?
Why don't we try getting more people involved?
Would it help if we tried getting everybody together to talk?
How about we ask everyone else what they think?
What would you say to holding a meeting with everybody involved?
How does Ben react to Jerry's suggestion to pass on some of the admin work to the trainers?
Well, frankly, I'm already doing that to some extent, and I just think that there's a limit to how much it helps, if you know what I mean.
Uh-huh. Well, what are your views? How do you think we should deal with this?
Ben has previously tried this solution, so he doesn't think that Jerry's suggestion will help. He's careful, however, to disagree politely by using tentative language and buffers. For example, he says he's already doing that to some extent, that is, to some degree. Next, it's Jerry's turn to ask for Ben's suggestions about how to solve the problem. Of course, it's almost always important to get other people's points of view. In fact, Jerry may have done better to ask Ben for his suggestions before he gave his own. People will often be more likely to tell you their real opinion before you have told them what kind of solution you prefer. How does Jerry ask for Ben's opinion? He says, "Well, what are your views? How do you think we should deal with this?" Now, what are some other ways to resolve conflict by asking questions?
What kind of solutions would you propose?
What are your thoughts on how to move forward?
I was wondering what your ideas on this situation are.
What sort of suggestions might you have for reaching a solution?
For now, we'll leave Ben and Jerry there. We'll be returning to their conversation in the second part of this series on resolving conflict. To finish off today, let's practice some of what we've learned. First, we'll review active listening and showing sympathy. Imagine you are a team leader talking to employees about problems they have at work. First, each employee will state his or her problem. Then, after the beep, use the expressions we have learned today to listen actively and show sympathy. Remember to acknowledge, echo, and give a sympathetic personal reaction. For example, if you hear, "I'm really frustrated with my work hours," you might say, frustrated. I can see what you mean. Other ways we've studied to show sympathy include, for example, "I can see you feel strongly about this," or, "Right, I think that's a valid concern."
I'm the last one to leave here every night, and it's getting to be kind of a strain.
Example answer. Every night. Well, I think that's a valid concern.
I just don't see why I have to work the early shift every day.
Example answer. Early shift every day. Yeah, I understand. That would be frustrating for you.
Most of my coworkers are late every day, and I have to do an unfair share of work.
Example answer. Unfair share of work. I can see that you feel strongly about this.
Now we'll practice key phrases and words for making suggestions and asking questions to resolve the conflict. You'll hear a series of sentences. In each sentence, one word is blanked out with a beep. Repeat the sentence, but say the missing word. For example, if you hear,
What kind of would you propose?
You'll say, what kind of solutions would you propose? This is a great way to revise collocations. We'll play the correct answer after each exercise. Let's give it a try.
Would it help if we tried getting everybody to talk? Answer. Would it help if we try getting everybody together to talk?
What would you say to holding a meeting with everybody? Answer. What would you say to holding a meeting with everybody involved?
What kind of would you propose? Answer. What kind of solutions would you propose?
What your ideas on this situation are. Answer. I was wondering what your ideas on this situation are.
What are your thoughts on how to move? Answer. What are your thoughts on how to move forward?
That's all for this episode, which is the first in a two-part series on resolving conflict. We've looked at useful language for opening the discussion, identifying the problem, making suggestions, and asking questions. In the second part, we'll study stating common goals and agreeing action, among other things. In the meanwhile, be sure to check out the study notes for this and other episodes at www.businessenglishpod.com. There you'll find complete transcripts, including additional vocabulary and review exercises. Also, try signing up for the Online Learning Centre for access to a wide range of further study activities. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Want to get more out of Business English Pod? Then go to www.businessenglishpod.com and sign up as a premium member. Premium members can access detailed study notes and the new Phrasecast to practice all the useful language we featured today. You're listening to Business English Pod, the Business English podcast for professionals on the move.
Business English Pod is turning 2. And to celebrate, we're giving away an iPhone each month to new premium members. All you have to do is purchase a 6 or 12-month premium membership during May or June of 2008. We'll hold a prize drawing each month, and the winner will receive a brand new iPhone. To learn more, visit www.businessenglishpod.com.
Hello, my name is Jennifer, and this is the second in a two-part series on resolving conflict, in which we've been focusing on solving everyday disagreements in the office. Ben, a new training specialist at a manufacturing company, feels that he is doing an unfair share, that is, too much, of the work in his department. Jerry, Ben's manager, talks with him to solve the problem. In the first episode, we studied how Jerry opened the discussion in an informal, non-threatening way, and we looked at how he listened actively to Ben to win his trust. In this episode, we'll pay attention to how Jerry and Ben work together to come up with a solution. In particular, we'll focus on how they state common goals, raise concerns, and agree action. Where we left off last time, Jerry had just asked a question to resolve the conflict. Jerry wants to know what Ben would suggest doing to fix the situation. As you listen, try to answer the following questions. The correct responses will be posted in a few days on our website. 1. What solution does Ben propose? 2. In which area does Ben feel he could make a real contribution? 3. What action do Ben and Jerry agree on?
Well, what are your views? How do you think we should deal with this?
Well, for the sales trainings, for example, don't you think that we could get their team to help out a little? I mean, after all, we've all got the same objective.
Yes, that might be worth a try. And I think the IT folks could also step up to the plate.
Yeah, that would free me up quite a bit and give me a bit more time for course planning. And to be honest, I don't feel like I'm being given a free enough rein in that area.
And so that's something you'd like to focus on more.
Yeah, I'd really like to take a more active role because I think it's an area where I could make a real contribution.
Sure. Okay, this is what we'll do then. I'll talk to sales and IT and try to get some admin support for the next round of trainings.
Sounds good.
At the same time, we'll tweak the design process a little so you can get more involved.
What do you have in mind?
Well, why don't we start with this? Can you conduct a needs analysis for the IT department and give me a proposal by next Wednesday?
Okay.
Let's get the ball rolling on this and see where we are next week. How does that sound?
Sounds like a plan.
Great. Let's give it a shot.
Let's go through the language that Jerry and Ben use to reach an agreement. How does the dialogue begin? Remember, Jerry has just asked Ben what he would suggest to solve the problem.
Well, for the sales trainings, for example, don't you think that we could get their team to help out a little? I mean, after all, we've all got the same objective.
Ben starts out by making a suggestion. He proposes getting the sales team to help out with the sales trainings. We have already studied the language of suggestions in the first episode in this series. Also, you may want to review BEP 30 and 31, which are intermediate-level podcasts that deal specifically with making, accepting, and rejecting suggestions. Next, Ben does something very important. He emphasizes that everyone has shared goals. I mean, after all, we've all got the same objective, he says. Stating common goals is an important part of resolving conflict. It helps participants in a disagreement to see the bigger picture and reminds them that they share interests. What are some other ways to state shared goals?
We're all in this together.
We're all working towards the same goal.
We're all on the same side.
Everyone agrees on the fundamental objectives.
How does Jerry react to Ben's suggestion to get the sales department to help out with training?
Yes, that might be worth a try. And I think the IT folks could also step up to the plate.
To step up to the plate, as we learned in BEP 57 and 58, sports idioms, means to take the initiative, to take an active role in doing something, or to take responsibility for something. Jerry says, yes, that might be worth a try. He is agreeing with Ben's suggestion here and expressing satisfaction with this approach. Giving voice to this kind of agreement is an important part of resolving conflict. What are some other ways to do this?
Great suggestion.
I really think that's a good idea.
I like that approach.
I'm glad you suggested that.
That sounds like it might work well.
How does the dialogue continue? Ben gives a reason for wanting other departments to help with training. He says the IT and sales department's assistants would free him up or give him more time to do course planning. Then he raises a concern, that is, he brings up another area of disagreement. Listen.
And to be honest, I don't feel like I'm being given a free enough rein in that area.
And so that's something you'd like to focus on more.
As Jerry did to open the discussion during the first episode, Ben uses an idiom and qualifiers to raise his concern in an informal, non-threatening way. He says, to be honest, he is not being given quite enough of a free rein. For a full discussion of the free rein idiom, see the study notes at www.businessenglishpod.com. Meanwhile, Jerry continues to listen actively so that Ben knows he is paying attention. Even when one problem has already been solved in a discussion, we may need to bring up other issues. Let's study some more useful language for raising a concern.
Actually, there is something else that I think might be worth mentioning.
While we have a chance to talk, let me just bring up one other minor point.
Just let me mention one more thing, if I may.
In the next part, Ben provides reasons for why he would like to get more involved in course planning. He would like to take a more active role because it's an area where he could make a real contribution. For practice and example sentences of these useful collocations, be sure to check out the study notes. How does the dialogue continue? Jerry is ready to agree on action.
Sure. Okay, this is what we'll do then. I'll talk to sales and IT and try to get some admin support for the next round of trainings.
Sounds good.
At the same time, we'll tweak the design process a little so you can get more involved.
As Ben's manager, Jerry has the authority and responsibility to decide what action to take. Nevertheless, he is careful to include Ben and emphasize teamwork by using we. Okay, this is what we'll do then. And at the same time, we'll tweak the design process. To tweak something is to modify it slightly. Jerry wants to change work processes to ensure Ben has an opportunity to get more involved in, that is, work more closely on course design. Agreeing action is a very important part of resolving conflict. Let's review some phrases we can use.
All right, here's what we'll do.
Here's a way we can move forward.
Here's what we'll do to tackle this problem.
Tackle in the last sentence means to solve. This idiom was also covered in BEP 57. What's Jerry's plan? He would like to have Ben do a needs analysis of the IT department. Needs analysis refers to researching the needs of a group to understand how to serve them better, or, in this case, what kind of training to provide. How does Jerry finish the discussion? Notice that he is careful to plan follow-up action.
Let's get the ball rolling on this and see where we are next week. How does that sound?
By planning follow-up, we can ensure that everyone knows we are sincere about solving the problem, and of course give ourselves an opportunity to check that the solution is working. In planning action, Jerry uses informal, idiomatic language to continue in the non-threatening tone of the conversation. He says, "Let's get the ball rolling on this and see where we are next week." To get the ball rolling means to get started. How does Ben respond?
Sounds like a plan.
Great. Let's give it a shot.
Sounds like a plan means let's do that. And let's give it a shot is similar to let's give it a try. It means let's try it out and give it our best. Finally, let's review some other expressions we can use to plan action.
Let's try this out, then meet again in a month's time to take stock.
Let's get the ball rolling and get back together in a couple of weeks to see how it's going.
Let's start with this and see how it works. We'll check again next Tuesday to see if there's been any change.
To take stock means to analyze results. Now it's your turn to practice. You are the team leader. An employee has come to you with a problem. You've decided what to do, so it's time to agree action. You'll hear a series of cues that state the action you'd like to take. After the beep, use the language we've studied to agree on what to do. Remember to use we to emphasize teamwork. For example, if you hear, take a 15-minute coffee break in the afternoon, you might say, all right, here's what we'll do. Let's take a 15-minute coffee break in the afternoon. Other language you can use is, here's a way we can move forward, and here's what we'll do to tackle this problem. After each exercise, you will hear an example answer.
Hold weekly team meetings to build team spirit.
Example answer. Here's a way to move forward. Let's hold weekly team meetings to build team spirit.
Get everyone together to discuss the problem.
Example answer. Here's a way we can move forward. Let's get everyone together to discuss the problem.
Now let's review some useful language. You'll hear a series of sentences. In each sentence, one word is blanked out with a beep. Repeat the sentence, but say the missing word. For example, if you hear,
we're all in this,
you will say,
we're all in this together.
We're all on the same. Answer. We're all on the same side.
I'm. You suggested that. Answer. I'm glad you suggested that.
Just let me mention one more thing, if I... Answer. Just let me mention one more thing, if I may.
Let's try this out, then meet again in a month's time to take. Answer. Let's try this out, then meet again in a month's time to take stock.
Let's get the ball and get back together in a couple of weeks to see how it's going. Answer. Let's get the ball rolling and get back together in a couple of weeks to see how it's going.
That concludes this two-part series on resolving conflict. We've studied non-threatening language for opening the discussion and for raising concerns. And we've looked at building trust by listening actively and stating common objectives. Also, we've practiced making suggestions, expressing satisfaction, and agreeing action. Be sure to check out the study notes for this and other podcasts at www.businessenglishpod.com. And if you're not already a member, you can sign up for a free trial and explore all the online resources in the Learning Centre. Thanks for listening.
Want Want to get more out of Business English Pod? Then go to www.businessenglishpod.com and sign up as a premium member. Premium members can access detailed study notes and the new Phrasecast to practice all the useful language we featured today. You're listening to Business English Pod, the Business English podcast for professionals on the move.
Business English Pod is turning 2. And to celebrate, we're giving away an iPhone each month to new premium members. All you have to do is purchase a 6 or 12-month premium membership during May or June of 2008. We'll hold a prize drawing each month, and the winner will receive a brand new iPhone. To learn more, visit www.businessenglishpod.com.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Gray, and I'll be your host for this lesson. No deal gets made, no contract gets signed, no business gets done, just between two people or two companies. Everything occurs against the background of networks of relationships on the local, regional, and global scales. These relationships of price and production form what's called the economy. People who study the economy, economists, like to point out, for example, that the price of soybeans in Brazil can affect the price of meat in China. It's no wonder, then, that a favourite activity of business people everywhere is talking about the economy. Only by understanding the economic environment in which we do business can we operate effectively in it. In this episode, we'll be studying some phrases and vocabulary that we can use to discuss economic issues, including voicing and reassuring concerns. The dialogue today takes place at Kendall Marcus, a global retailer of upmarket clothing and accessories. A retailer sells goods to the end customer. Accessories are things like jewellery and belts, which go along with or accessorise clothing. During a trip to Shanghai, Martin, a VP at Kendall's, is visiting Tony Wu, country manager for China. As you listen, try to answer the following questions. As usual, the answers will be posted in a few days on our website. 1. Why has Martin come to China? 2. Is Tony optimistic about the economic outlook, that is, the future, in China? 3. What kind of concerns does Martin have? 4. How does Tony reassure him?
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm looking forward to seeing some other parts of China.
Yes, I think you'll be really impressed by the pace of development in these second-tier cities.
Speaking of that, what's your view on the immediate economic outlook here?
Well, the headline figures, except for inflation, all look great. Overall GDP is up 12%. Growth in consumption is robust. But inflation is hitting basic food prices pretty hard. For example, the CPI in Shanghai is up 8% on last year. That said, so far it's mainly affecting lower income brackets.
So do you have any concerns about inflation affecting the purchase of non-essentials?
Not particularly. At this point, income growth in China's new middle class is still really strong.
I see. But continued growth in this area is key to our plans here. It seems to me it's something we can't just rely on published figures for.
Yes, definitely. Our market research is focused directly at middle-income demographics.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing the outcome. Now, what's your take on the long-term outlook? What are some of the challenges you see?
Looking beyond the Olympics, which will provide an obvious boost, there's 3 main areas of concern: jobs for farmers, inflation, and the income gap between rich and poor.
I see. And what about political stability? Do you think issues like the widening income gap you just mentioned may be a threat?
Well, it's certainly going to increase stresses on society. But I think the real challenge will be sustaining economic growth to provide enough employment for the masses.
Yes, well, thanks, Tony. That's helped reassure some of my concerns. I'll be sure to share your views with the executive committee.
Martin and Tony have covered a lot of ground in their conversation, ranging from the immediate situation to the long-term view or outlook. Now we're going to go through the dialogue, piece by piece, to study useful language and expressions. Let's start with the beginning of the dialogue. Listen again.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm looking forward to seeing some other parts of China.
Yes, I think you'll be really impressed by the pace of development in these second-tier cities.
Speaking of that, what's your view on the immediate economic outlook here?
It sounds like Martin and Tony have been talking about Martin's travel plans. Apparently, Martin is going to be visiting some second-tier or smaller cities. From the dialogue, we learn that Kendall Marcus is planning to expand its operation from larger urban areas into these secondary regions. So Martin is very concerned about finding out whether or not the current economic environment in China is good for such a move. He starts his query by asking, "Speaking of that, what's your view on the immediate economic outlook here?" Speaking of that is a way to connect his question to the previous topic. Immediate economic outlook refers to the near economic future. What are some other ways to ask about current economic events? Let's practice a variety of phrases that could be used in different situations.
I'm a bit out of touch. What's been happening with your market these days?
What's happening in your market at the moment?
What's the unemployment situation at the moment?
What do you think about the monetary policy in your country?
Of course, we've been reading a lot in the newspapers about the recession in the US. How is it affecting your economy?
How is your company doing?
For a complete list of the vocabulary used in these phrases, along with definitions and example sentences, refer to the study notes for this episode, available at www.businessenglishpod.com. Now, how does Tony respond to Martin's query about the present economic environment?
Well, the headline figures, except for inflation, all look great. Overall GDP is up 12%. Growth in consumption is robust.
Tony uses a range of vocabulary here to describe the economy. He starts by saying that the headline, or important figures, all look great. For example, GDP, or gross domestic product, is up, that is, has increased, 12%, and growth in consumption is robust or strong. Let's keep listening.
Inflation is hitting basic food prices pretty hard. For example, the CPI in Shanghai is up 8% on last year. That said, so far it's mainly affecting lower income brackets.
Tony continues by describing how inflation, or the increase in prices, is hitting, that is affecting, food prices pretty hard. He goes on to say that the CPI in Shanghai is up 8% on, or compared with, last year. CPI refers to Consumer Price Index, which is a measure of inflation. Tony finishes off by saying, and this is very important to his argument, that the inflation is mainly affecting lower income brackets. That is, people with less income, who will probably not buy Kendall Marcus's products. As you can see, a lot of talking about the economy is describing trends. We've done some great episodes on describing trends, including BEP 103, which is part of our ebook on presentations, so that would be a good episode to review. Now, let's review some more example phrases of this economic vocabulary in use.
Though the headline figures all look pretty good, economists are still concerned about the long-term outlook.
GDP is certainly an important measure of economic growth, but it doesn't really take into consideration how the economy affects the environment.
Inflation in food prices obviously hits the poorest people the hardest.
A CPI is usually based on a basket of basic goods such as food, cooking oil, and fuel.
Getting back to our dialogue, how does Martin respond to Tony's statements?
So do you have any concerns about inflation affecting the purchase of non-essentials?
Not particularly. At this point, income growth in China's new middle class is still really strong.
Martin is voicing a concern about whether or not inflation will affect the market for non-essential goods, like Kendall's products. Essential describes something that we need, like food or water. So non-essential refers to luxuries. Tony responds by reassuring Martin. Tony's not particularly worried since income growth in China's new middle class is still really strong. That means the middle class, people who buy Kendall's products, are still getting richer all the time. Voicing concerns is something that we are constantly doing about the economy. It's a basic part of thinking about the economic situation to be concerned about how it will affect us. Let's review some more useful phrases for voicing concerns.
That's all well and good, but don't you think the rise in prices will have a large impact on the market?
I'm really concerned about the fall in demand.
We're all very interested in how the macro environment of global markets is going to affect local competition.
This is certainly a major area of concern for us, don't you think?
Though Tony has tried to reassure Martin, he's not totally convinced yet, is he? As Martin continues, he comes back to his worry about whether or not the growing wealth of China's middle class will provide a sustainable market for Kendall's products.
I see, but continued growth in this area is key to our plans here. It seems to me it's something we can't just rely on published figures for.
Yes, definitely. Our market research is focused directly at middle-income demographics.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing the outcome.
Tony agrees with Martin's point that Kendall can't just rely on officially published figures, and he points out that Kendall Marcus China is carrying out its own market research on middle-income demographics. Demographics is a term from social science. It means the study of population or population statistics. In this case, it refers to a specific population group, middle-income people. As the dialogue continues, what is Martin's next question?
Now, what's your take on the long-term outlook? What are some of the challenges you see?
Looking beyond the Olympics, which will provide an obvious boost, there's three main areas of concern: jobs for farmers, inflation, and the income gap between rich and poor.
In this exchange, Martin queries Tony about the longer-term picture. He says, "What's your take on the long-term outlook?" "What's your take" means, "What's your opinion or view?" Tony responds that the Olympics in Beijing in 2008 will provide a boost, that is, help the economy. But then he lists three areas of concern: jobs for farmers, inflation, and the income gap between rich and poor. What are some other ways to ask about the general or longer-term picture? Let's learn some language for asking about the economy that would be useful in a variety of situations where we are interested in informing ourselves about general background information.
How about in the medium to long term? What kind of picture do you see?
Can you give us an idea of the economic prospects for the next 5 to 10 years?
What is the longer-term outlook for the stock market?
What are the main factors that will affect your market down the road?
Returning to the dialogue, finally, in the last part of their conversation, Martin focuses on the issue of political stability. That refers to the issue of whether the country or nation as a whole is stable or solid. But Tony thinks there is another, more important challenge. What is it?
I see. And what about political stability? Do you think issues like the widening income gap you just mentioned may be a threat?
Well, it's certainly going to increase stresses on society. But I think the real challenge will be sustaining economic growth to provide enough employment for the masses.
Tony doesn't really agree that lack of political stability due to the income gap is a big issue. But instead of disagreeing with Martin directly, he acknowledges that the gap leads to stresses on society. Then he voices what he thinks the main challenge will be: sustaining or continuing economic growth. This yes, but approach is a good strategy for disagreeing, one that we've practiced before, for example in the intermediate level podcast BEP 29. The point here is to express disagreement diplomatically in order to keep the conversation going. This can be particularly important when talking about economic problems, since issues of finance and money can be so sensitive. Also, as we've seen in the dialogue, the yes but structure can be useful for reassuring people's concerns. Let's practice a couple of yes but type sentence structures for disagreement. Pay attention to how the sentences work to reassure the questioner.
I'm worried that increasing labor costs will result in outsourcing.
Well, I suppose that higher labor costs can lead to outsourcing, but honestly, I don't think that it poses a significant threat in this case.
Don't you think the rise in oil prices is a significant danger to us?
Yes, I can see what you mean about that, but it's really not such a large concern, to be honest.
Finally, let's take a quick look at how the dialogue ends.
Yes, well, thanks, Tony. That's helped reassure some of my concerns. I'll be sure to share your views with the Executive Committee.
For the moment, Martin is satisfied. His concerns have been reassured. Now let's try our own hands at addressing some economic concerns. Imagine that you are talking to a visiting colleague about the economic situation in your country. First, you'll hear your visitor voice their concerns. Then, after the beep, use the yes but structure to reassure them. You can use such language as, "It's not a particularly big concern in my opinion," or "I don't think it poses a significant threat in this case." Let's give it a try.
So, aren't you worried that the American recession will have a big effect on our business?
Well, I'm still worried about how the fall in demand will affect our long-term outlook.
Let's listen now to example answers. Of course, your answers may be different.
So, aren't you worried that the American recession will have a big effect on our business?
Yes, of course it's a concern, but to be honest, it's not a particularly big one, in my opinion.
Well, I'm still worried about how the fall in demand will affect our long-term outlook.
Yes, the fall in demand is concerning, but honestly, I don't think it poses a significant threat in this case.
Now let's review some useful economic vocabulary. You'll hear a series of sentences. In each sentence, one word is blanked out with a beep. Repeat the sentence, but say the missing word. For example, if you hear,
Economists are still concerned about the long-term.
You will say, economists are still concerned about long-term outlook. After each exercise, the answer will be played.
The figures all look pretty good. Answer. The headline figures all look pretty good.
Gross product is certainly an important measure of economic growth. Answer. Gross domestic product is certainly an important measure of economic growth.
It's usually true that inflation, the poorest people the hardest. Answer. It's usually true that inflation hits the poorest people the hardest.
The consumer index is usually based on the prices of basic goods. Answer. The consumer price index is usually based on the prices of basic goods.
Political is certainly a major concern for us. Answer. Political stability is certainly a major concern for us.
That's all for this episode on talking about the economy. We've reviewed some key economic vocabulary, learned a range of useful phrases for asking about short and long-term outlooks and for voicing concerns, and practiced the yes-but structure for reassuring the questioner. Be sure to check out the study notes for this and other episodes at www.businessenglishpod.com. There you'll find vocabulary explanations and example sentences, language exercises, and full transcripts for the shows. Also, go to our website for access to our Learning Centre, which contains a wide range of additional language review and extension exercises. Thanks for listening.
Want to get more out of Business English Pod? Then go to www.businessenglishpod.com and sign up as a premium member. Premium members can access detailed study notes and the new Phrasecast to practice all the useful language we featured today. You're listening to Business English Pod, the Business English podcast for professionals on the move.
Today's podcast continues our series on business vocabulary, with a special focus on collocations or word partnerships. By focusing on words that are commonly used together, you can improve your vocabulary and also your ability to understand your English-speaking colleagues. When you think of office administration, what are the first things that come to mind? They might be things like paperwork, filing, copying, and other boring and repetitive tasks. Most people probably don't think of an office manager's job as a crucial service that supports the successful running of a company and therefore its ability to make money. Well, today we're about to meet Thomas, who's going to tell us about the role he plays as office manager at the Mexican subsidiary of a multinational chemical company. Listening questions. 1. How does Thomas summarize his role as office manager? 2. What characteristics does Thomas list as important qualities of an office manager? 3. According to Thomas, what is a common misunderstanding about the best way for an office manager to do his job?
So, Thomas, you're an office manager at one of Petrotex's regional offices. How would you summarize your role there?
Simply put, an office manager is responsible for the smooth operation of a company's day-to-day business. That means that I work closely with our general manager here in Mexico to meet the company's staffing, equipment, and organizational needs. In other words, my job is to coordinate all of the supporting functions of the company so that we can operate efficiently.
Uh-huh. And what are some of the supporting functions?
Well, they cover a pretty wide range. Everything from overseeing the facilities and paying the rent to interviewing job applicants and managing the payroll.
So what does it take to be a successful office manager? What are the key qualities companies are looking for?
The most important quality is the ability to exercise sound judgment and to do it day in, day out. One reason office managers take their jobs so seriously is that they have so many different areas of responsibility, and a single blunder can result in termination. So the pressure can be pretty severe, especially in a large office with many employees.
Okay. Well, then, given the stresses of the job, what type of personality is most likely to succeed in this role?
I'd say good office managers typically have many positive characteristics. Common sense, good humor, confidence, and the ability to motivate others. It's especially important that an office manager works well with others in a group.
I see.
Yes, a lot of people believe that an office manager should be someone who tries hard to make a good impression on his or her superiors. But most people who work in this job would disagree with that. They'll tell you that this job requires them to be firm, not always tactful, when there's a deadline approaching and the pressure's on.
Being an office manager might not sound so exciting at first, but as it turns out, Thomas's job has a lot of challenges, and there are a lot of things he needs to think about if he wants to do it well. Here's a simple explanation from Thomas of what an office manager does.
An office manager is responsible for the smooth operation of a company's day-to-day business.
The word smooth normally means flat or without any bumps or dips, like the surface of a table. So when we talk about the smooth operation of a business, we mean that things are going along at an even pace, without any unwanted surprises. Here are some other ways you might use this expression in a business context.
The smooth operation of our production line requires a reliable supply of raw materials.
Good interpersonal skills are critical to the smooth operation of a team.
Thomas explains that to keep an office running smoothly, an office manager needs to organize the activities that keep it going.
In other words, my job is to coordinate all of the supporting functions of the company.
Supporting functions in a business are tasks that may not seem exciting, but are essential to its smooth operation. They include everything from making sure that the computers and office equipment all work properly, to maintaining the office accounts and payroll. Let's listen to a few more examples.
We could cut costs by outsourcing a few of our supporting functions.
A serviced office space provides supporting functions for small businesses at an affordable price.
Thomas says that keeping track of these supporting functions is necessary
so that we can operate efficiently.
To operate efficiently means to get results with as little time or effort as possible, without wasting the company's resources or doing things in a disorganized way. Here are a few other examples.
Without properly trained staff, it's difficult to operate efficiently.
By making their invoice system operate more efficiently, they managed to speed up bill collection.
For a company to operate efficiently, a lot of things need to be done right. Thomas gives us a short list in the next part of the interview.
And what are some of the supporting functions?
Well, they cover a pretty wide range. Everything from overseeing the facilities and paying the rent to interviewing job applicants and managing the payroll.
Thomas uses 3 active verbs to describe common management activities: overseeing, interviewing, and managing. He is overseeing the facilities or buildings, interviewing job applicants, and managing the payroll or the employee's salary payments. For more detailed explanations and examples, you can check the study notes for this episode. These are some of Thomas's routine tasks, but the interviewer also wants to know the most useful or important quality of an office manager.
The most important quality is the ability to exercise sound judgment, and to do it day in, day out.
Judgment is the mental process that all of us use in making decisions, especially when the best choice isn't easy to make. When a decision is good, or when it's based on the right factors, we say that it shows sound judgment. And the verb we usually use with this term is to exercise. So you're likely to see these words appearing together fairly often. You can use this expression in phrases like these.
Choosing among job applicants means more than just comparing their resumes. It requires exercising sound judgment as well.
I expect our local managers to make decisions quickly and confidently while maintaining sound judgment.
When Thomas says that office managers should show good judgment day in, day out, he means that they need to perform well every single day, not just once in a while. Let's try a few other uses of this English idiom.
A customer service representative deals with angry clients day in, day out, so we need employees who are always positive and polite.
Lenny's been working day in, day out on that presentation for nearly 4 weeks now.
One of the aspects that makes an office manager's job challenging is that it covers many areas of responsibility, meaning that office managers are responsible for many different types of tasks. Here are a couple of other ways to use this expression.
How would you describe your previous job at Stanton Incorporated?
Well, my main area of responsibility was developing new customer leads, but I occasionally helped other sales staff to deal with our established clients.
Having more than one area of responsibility is certainly one challenge for office managers, but it's not the only one. According to Thomas, expectations for performance in this job are very high, and he even says that
a single blunder can result in termination.
A blunder is another term for a mistake or an error, usually one that happened because someone wasn't paying attention or thinking clearly. When Thomas says that just one mistake can result in termination, he means it can lead to an office manager losing their job or getting fired. In a business setting, expressions like getting fired may seem a little too casual, so the verb terminate, or the noun termination, is often used as a more formal alternative.
Management has made it clear that inappropriate use of the Internet during working hours will be cause for termination.
We've had to terminate 2 of our staff for failing to meet quarterly sales targets.
Being terminated isn't something most employees want to face, but how can an office manager perform well enough to avoid it? Well, Thomas thinks that to be successful, they need to have a certain kind of personality. He begins by listing a few of the most important qualities that office managers should have.
Good office managers typically have many positive characteristics: common sense, good humor, confidence, and the ability to motivate others.
Common sense is the ability to make the right decisions about simple things. Good humor is the ability to maintain a pleasant and cheerful mood, especially in challenging or stressful situations. Remember, good humour doesn't mean the same thing as humour. It's not about being funny or telling jokes. It's about staying in a good mood and helping others do the same. Lastly, to motivate someone means to encourage a person to be interested in doing something. Let's take a look at how you can use these collocations.
Common sense is the key to solving many problems.
Dealing with a difficult boss requires a positive attitude and good humor.
Team-building activities can be a good way to motivate employees.
Good humour and the ability to motivate staff have something in common. They both involve building relationships with other people in the office. Thomas uses another common expression to explain what this means for office managers.
It's especially important that an office manager works well with others in a group.
Being able to work well with others is the key to success in a lot of jobs. It means being able to keep other people happy and comfortable working with you, while at the same time contributing to the success of your team. Let's try using this expression in another situation.
Do you think Kevin would be a good choice for the new HR position we're trying to fill?
It's hard to say. Kevin's very productive, but he has trouble working well with some of the other staff.
At the end of the interview, Thomas explains one frequent misunderstanding about what a good office manager should try to do.
A lot of people believe that an office manager should be someone who tries hard to make a good impression on his or her superiors.
To make a good impression means to act in a way that makes other people admire you or feel positive about you. Doing a good job is certainly one way to make a good impression at work, but there are a few other things that help as well. Listen to these examples.
Tony is very professional, but he doesn't always make a good impression with new clients because he's a bit quiet and reserved. A well-written cover letter can help make a good impression during your job search.
But why does Thomas think that making a good impression isn't all that important for office managers? Well, here's how he explains it.
This job requires them to be firm, not always tactful, when there's a deadline approaching and the pressure's on.
In other words, making your colleagues feel good about you isn't always the right way to get the job done. There are times when an office manager needs to act decisively and to make sure other employees do their jobs. According to Thomas, that's especially true when the pressure is on. This is an expression we use when a situation is very stressful or challenging.
Sarah's a good manager under normal circumstances, but she gets stressed out too easily.
I've noticed that too. She doesn't perform very well when the pressure's on.
Now it's your turn to practice. Let's first review the verb collocations we've covered today. In a few moments, you'll hear a series of sentences with a verb blanked out or replaced with a beep. Repeat the whole sentence, supplying the missing verb in its correct form. For example, if you hear,
"We found we could efficiently with fewer staff than we thought,"
you can say,
"We found we could operate efficiently with fewer staff than we thought."
Let's give it a try.
Arriving late didn't help Paul. A good impression on his first day at work. Answer. Arriving late didn't help Paul make a good impression on his first day at work.
An HR manager should sound judgment in settling disagreements among employees. Answer. An HR manager should exercise sound judgment in settling disagreements among employees.
As office manager, one of my tasks was the facilities. Answer. As office manager, one of my tasks was overseeing the facilities.
Being able to well with others is the key to success in this position. Answer. Being able to work well with others is the key to success in this position.
Now we'll use the same method to review today's key vocabulary. In a moment, you'll hear another series of cues in which one word is blanked out with a beep. Repeat each sentence, adding the missing vocabulary word.
Team building activities can be a good way to employees. Answer. Team building activities can be a good way to motivate employees.
We outsource most of our functions to save money. Answer. We outsource most of our supporting functions to save money.
Some of our cost-cutting measures have been based on sense, like buying in larger quantities to get discounts. Answer. Some of our cost-cutting measures have been based on common sense, like buying in larger quantities to get discounts.
Sam's a great team leader, but he can get a little stressed when the on. Answer. Sam's a good team leader, but he can get a little stressed when the pressure's on.
And that concludes our episode on the job description of an office manager. Don't forget to check out the study notes in the Learning Centre at www.businessenglishpod.com. There you'll find detailed vocabulary explanations, practice activities, and full transcripts of this and other episodes. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
Want to get more out of Business English Pod? Then go to www.businessenglishpod.com and sign up as a premium member. Premium members can access detailed study notes and the new Phrasecast to practice all the useful language we featured today.
You're watching Video Vocab by BusinessEnglishPod.com.
This episode of Video Vocab is the first of a two-part series on vocabulary related to risk management. In this episode, we'll take a general look at risk management in the business world.
All businesses have to deal with risk, but successful businesses are the ones that employ good risk management. Risks come in all shapes and sizes. A risk could be a minor critical event, an event that may or may not affect the operations of the business. Or it could be volatility in financial markets, or it could be something major like the possibility of a natural disaster, such as a flood. Along with corporate governance and compliance, risk management is an important part of organizational planning and decision-making. Companies must show due diligence in these areas in order to be successful. Of course, different companies will think of risk differently. Some will accept much greater exposure to risk than others. In this case, we say they have a greater risk appetite. This may be partially determined to how much public scrutiny the corporation is subject to. Resource companies, for example, may be watched very carefully. To manage risk well, companies have to learn to diagnose potential problems. They use critical incident analysis to determine what types of risks they face and how best to prevent or deal with them.
Now let's look at the vocabulary in more detail with some definitions and examples. Risk.
Risk management.
Risk is the idea that certain events or situations can potentially bring losses to a company. The losses could affect finances, image, operations, or any other aspect of business.
Investments that involve a lot of risk often provide much larger returns.
Critical event.
Critical event.
A critical event is anything that happens which is potentially damaging to a business. A critical event could be as small as running out of printer ink or as large as an industrial accident.
During a critical event, a company's leaders need to clearly communicate their response to all stakeholders.
Volatility.
Volatility.
Volatility is the tendency to change, for better or worse, suddenly or surprisingly. A volatile investment, such as investing in a new tech company startup, can be risky but also bring great profits.
Political troubles have brought a lot of volatility to the stock market.
Natural disaster.
Natural disaster.
A natural disaster is an event in nature that causes destruction, damage, or social problems. Hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, fires, heat waves, avalanches, and droughts are all examples of natural disasters.
A natural disaster such as an earthquake or flood can severely impact a small country's economy.
Corporate governance.
Corporate governance.
Corporate governance relates to how well a company is managed. When we talk about good corporate governance, we're talking about responsible and transparent decision-making and leadership.
good corporate governance is especially important in times of economic instability.
Compliance.
Compliance.
Following rules, regulations, and laws is compliance. The verb form of compliance is comply, and we can say that a company complies with regulations.
Our lawyers have reviewed the contract to ensure that we're in full compliance with industry regulations.
Due diligence.
Due diligence.
When we do all the necessary research and investigation before making a decision or signing a contract, we are performing due diligence. Due diligence might show that people were not honest about profits or potential problems.
Before buying a business, you must perform due diligence on both the business and the seller.
Exposure.
Exposure to risk.
In risk management, exposure is about how much risk you face. High exposure, operating in a politically unstable country, for example, means you face a lot of risk and a lot of potential damage.
My financial advisor said my exposure to risk was too great and recommended more secure investments.
Risk appetite.
Risk appetite.
The amount of risk or level of exposure that a company is willing to accept is its risk appetite. People and companies with a high risk appetite, such as venture capitalists, usually anticipate great future profits.
The company experienced many crises because its risk appetite was too high.
Public scrutiny.
Public scrutiny.
Scrutiny is close examination or study. Public scrutiny, therefore, is when the public looks closely at a person or company, especially to see whether their behavior is ethical or legal.
After scandals in companies such as Enron, corporate accounting is subject to much greater public scrutiny.
Diagnose.
To diagnose a problem.
When we diagnose a problem, we are trying to find the cause of or reasons for that problem. Just as doctors diagnose diseases, in business, we may try to diagnose what is wrong with a company, an agreement, a product, or a situation.
As a consultant, it's my job to diagnose potential problems with our clients' business plans.
Critical incident analysis.
Critical incident analysis.
Critical incident analysis is a set of techniques or methods that are used to find and solve problems in a company, a process, or a system.
Critical incident analysis has provided our company with the tools to deal with big problems when they happen.
Now it's your turn to practice some of the words we've looked at in this episode. You'll hear a series of sentences with a word replaced with a beep. Repeat the whole sentence, including the missing word. For example, if you hear,
Investors with a high risk should be prepared for possible losses.
You can say,
Investors with a high risk appetite should be prepared for possible losses.
We'll play the correct answer after each question. Are you ready? Let's begin.
Before signing the merger agreement, we spent 3 months doing due Answer. Before signing the merger agreement, we spent 3 months doing due diligence.
An important part of good corporate is transparency. Answer. An important part of good corporate governance is transparency.
At the beginning of a critical, people may panic. Answer. At the beginning of a critical event, people may panic.
We are open to public because we have nothing to hide. Answer. We are open to public scrutiny because we have nothing to hide.
That's all for this episode of Video Vocab. Come back next week for the second part in this series. In the meantime, check out our website at www.videovocab.tv to watch and download lots more videos on business English vocabulary. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon.
You're watching Video Vocab by BusinessEnglishPod.com.
This episode of Video Vocab is the second of our two-part series on vocabulary related to risk management. Today, we'll focus on the process of risk management planning.
Well-run companies have a risk management strategy that they use to help guide the organization and make decisions. There may be a risk management strategy for the organization as a whole, which attempts to account for both external and internal risks to the company. This planning may also happen on a smaller scale as a part of a project appraisal. Either way, the purpose is to attempt to predict or foresee all of the different hazards that may negatively impact operations. Once potential risks have been identified, companies may choose to avoid the risk or to share the risk through what is known as risk transfer. Risks that cannot be avoided or shared may be mitigated or retained. Communication is crucial, and a risk management strategy will have guidelines for disclosure of information, which is a key component of reputation management. A good strategy also lays out contingency plans in case of a critical incident.
External and internal risks.
External and internal risks.
External risks are those that exist outside of a company, such as the general condition of the economy and activities by competitors. Internal risks are those inside of a company, such as problem employees and budget overruns.
An analysis of the company's external and internal risks revealed that there were significant problems.
Project appraisal.
Project appraisal.
When you examine a proposed project and try to figure out whether it is good or bad, risky or safe, you are doing a project appraisal. Conducting a project appraisal will help a company determine which projects and products will make money.
The project appraisal showed that the budget was unrealistic and that the timeline was too short.
Predict, foresee.
To predict, to foresee.
To predict or to foresee is to look into the future and try to guess what will happen. If we predict changes in the marketplace, in the economy, and in customers, we can avoid risk and find opportunities.
Smart investors try to predict changes in the market before they happen.
Hazard.
Hazard.
The specific situations that might cause damage or harm to a company in the future are called hazards. Employee dissatisfaction, increased competition, and product failures are all examples of hazards.
Geotech avoided the hazards of large debt by expanding operations very slowly.
Avoid.
To avoid.
To avoid a risk is to not accept it. In business, avoiding a risk may mean not accepting an agreement or not investing in a particular country or project.
While many banks lost money in the subprime crisis, Morgan Holdings managed to avoid any problems.
Transfer.
To transfer risk.
When we share risk or give it to another company, we are transferring that risk. Risk transference almost always means buying insurance.
Buying a good insurance policy is one way that companies can transfer risk.
Mitigate.
To mitigate risk.
Another way to deal with risk is to mitigate it or decrease the potential damage of a risk that can be avoided. For example, companies use antivirus software to reduce the probability of and damage from computer viruses.
The effects of the strike were mitigated by the fact that it was a typically slow period in the business cycle.
Retain.
Retain risks.
A company may retain or accept certain risks if they see the potential for profits or advantage.
Some companies choose to retain risks and simply incorporate the potential losses into their budgets.
Disclosure.
Full disclosure.
Disclosure is showing or revealing information, usually negative information about a situation.
The Internal Revenue Service expects full disclosure of all profits and investments.
Reputation management.
Reputation management.
Companies must pay close attention to their public image and what people think. This is part of reputation management, which also involves responding to negative media coverage and promoting the business through marketing and branding.
Decker Minerals hired a public relations firm to help them with reputation management.
Contingency plan.
Contingency plan.
A contingency plan is the planned allocation of resources that are to be used in the event that something unforeseen affects the completion of a project according to the schedule.
When we had a fire at the factory, we put our contingency plan into action.
Now it's your turn to practice some of the words we have studied in this episode. You'll hear a series of sentences with a word replaced with a beep. Repeat the whole sentence, but say the missing word. For example, if you hear,
A good reputation plan can help a company recover from serious mistakes.
you can say,
A good reputation management plan can help a company recover from serious mistakes.
We'll play the correct answer after each question. Ready? Let's give it a go.
It is impossible to. All of the possible consequences of a business decision. Answer. It is impossible to predict all of the possible consequences of a business decision.
We considered both external and internal in creating our plan. Answer. We considered both external and internal risks in creating our plan.
The safety inspector found several potential in the factory. Answer. The safety inspector found several potential hazards in the factory.
We conducted a complete of the project before signing the contract. Answer. We conducted a complete appraisal of the project before signing the contract.
That's all for this episode of Video Vocab. Be sure to check out our website at www.videovocab.tv for more videos on business English vocabulary. Thanks for watching, and see you again soon.